Hey, what's up? Richard Bryce here. In this video, I want to help you to improve your backhand technique. Now, we're not going to be breaking down the technique and talking about the biomechanics in that sense, because there's a lot of videos that cover it. Fantastic videos, but what we're going to be focusing on in this video is kind of how to make the changes. So we're going to be talking about how to identify what it is that you need to work on. We're going to be talking about how to kind of approach making the changes so that you can kind of break some of the bad habits that you've got. And then we're also going to talk about some of the things that might be holding you back from implementing and making the changes that we're talking about. So I hope you find this video helpful. If you do, it'd be great if you could give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, it'd be fantastic if you could do that as well. So the first part of this video is all about identifying what you need to focus on and what changes you need to make. Because the way that our brains work, the way our bodies work, we can only think about so much stuff at any one time. So although there's a lot of things that are going to be important for you to hit a high level backhand technique, you can't change everything all at one go. So you can't focus on your split step and your unit turn and your preparation and your movement to the ball and this and this and this. It's just too much information for the brain to handle. So what you need to do is choose to focus on one or two things at any one time. Now the key here is understanding that tennis shots are sequences of events. It's kind of a sequence of steps that all happen one after each other. So it's really important that you get the first few steps right before you're going to be able to get the rest of it right. And this is this is where it goes wrong for so many people. And unfortunately, I see this go wrong a lot of the time in coaching as well. Obviously, you've got to get to the ball, you've got to get it set up in the right position to have a good chance of hitting it well. I cannot tell you how many lessons I've been watching or I've seen in my lifetime where the person is just way too close to the ball and the coach is trying to correct them on some precise thing that's happening with their wrist at the moment of contact. And it is very important what you do, the balance between right hand and left hand and all that stuff at contact, all that stuff is really important. But if you're too close to the ball, it's in there, then that's the problem that you've got to solve first. So when it comes to your tennis, this is what you've got to do as well. Now the best way to do this is to record yourself so you can see exactly what's happening. It's a little bit scary when you record yourself, especially as we compare ourselves to the pros that we see on TV, and those guys and girls are amazing. And unfortunately, I don't look like that, so maybe you don't look like it as well. So you've got to get over that, but video is really useful to let you know what's going on. It's a good idea to record yourself from the side and record yourself from behind so you can see the contact points and so you can see your spacing and stuff like that. So you want to record yourself, but what we're looking for is, okay, what's going on? We're going to be starting first with a split step. So if you're not doing a split step, I talk about this a lot, you want to start doing your split step. There's a reason that every professional on tennis on TV does a split step, so that's what you need to work on first if you're not doing it. Next comes the unit turn. So it doesn't matter whether you've got a single-hander, a double-hander or a slice. I'm going to go from there as a single-hander. I'm doing the unit turn where I rotate my upper body. I've got to get that torso round because that's going to allow me to initiate the drive. You've also got to get your hips turned. Again, for the same reason. So generally, the unit turn, so the upper body turn and the foot pivot at the same time. So now I've got my torso rotated and I've got my pelvis pointing that way. So now I can hit from there or I can hit from an open stance. Same thing on a double hander. I'm still going back. I've done the pivot, I've done this, torso's rotated, hips rotated, so I can step in and hit from a neutral stance, or I can hit from an open stance. So are you doing your split step? If not, that's the thing you want to focus on. Are you doing this good first move with a unit turn and the pivot? If not, that's what you want to focus on first. Next, we've got the movement to the ball. So footwork isn't glamorous, but it's also one of the big differences between the levels of tennis player. High-level tennis players have much better quality of footwork, and you have to get in the right position to hit the shot well in the first place. So if you're not using your feet well, if you don't understand the basic ways to move to the ball, and I'll place a couple of links down below that might be useful to you. If you don't understand the steps that are going to allow you to get in the right position, that's what you need to work on. Then we've got kind of the spacing and positioning. Like I kind of alluded to at the start, a lot of people get a little bit too close to the ball. If you're too close to the ball, it doesn't allow you to have that outward swing path. And if you don't do that, you're not going to be able to generate power efficiently, which is going to lead to more errors. So you've got to make sure that your spacing is right. So you want to watch it on video, get that video from behind, and when you hit your backhand, are you getting too close to the ball, or do you have sufficient space? If that's the problem, then you need to work on that. And then, and only then, do we get to the actual swing and what we do with our feet and the contact point. So obviously the swing is going to be really, really important. You need to have prepared and taken your racket back into an ideal position. So as a one-hander, it's going to be some variation of this. For a slice, it's going to be up there. For a two-hander, it's going to be some variation of this. Again, I'm not going to go into minute detail about these technical elements. This is about the implementation, but you've got to make sure that that's happening next. Then you've got the actual swing path itself. Then you've got the contact point with the all-important keeping your head still on contact. And then you've got the follow through, and then you've got the recovery steps back to the middle. So you've got to think about tennis in the sequence of events like that, starting at the start, working through and addressing them ideally in order. And it's really important that you do that. Now, just one quick note on the follow through. The way that you follow through is a product of everything that's gone before it. So I know some coaches talk about thinking about the follow through, and I understand that. Sometimes you need to think about the follow through to help with the stuff before it. But just for you to understand, this is pure physics. Once you've hit the ball, you know, the ball's gone. Everything that happens after it can't influence the ball. So the follow through is just a product of what went before it. So often it's not a major thing that you're going to need to address, especially as it's kind of a last thing that happens as a result of everything else. But you want to look at the video of yourself, go through these steps in order, see what's going on. Obviously, if this is something you want help with, reach out to me. It's definitely something I can help with, but you can go through it in order, see what you need to work on, and then once you know, that's where we'll get into part 2, implementing the changes. Once you've identified what you need to work on, the next thing is you need to have a strategy for working on it. And this is something that a lot of people get wrong. Now, our brains can only cope with so much information at one time. So although there's lots of different things that are going to be important for the backhand, and we've just talked about them, you can't give enough attention to 4, 5, 6 different things in one go. It's just too much for the brain to handle. And when you're trying to make changes, especially if you're doing something a certain way and you're trying to maybe break a bad habit or change the way that you're doing it, it requires effort and focus and repetition just on that one little thing. So you've got to choose maybe 1 or 2 things to focus on, and that's why I said we've got to maybe start at the start rather than thinking about things at the end. But then you have to practice that one specific thing over and over again. We have to go through what's called the cognitive stage of learning. That's where you're having to think about it. You have to do that for a sufficient length of time, then it becomes automatic, and that's when it'll start to happen naturally during points and matches. But it takes an accumulation of repetitions before it's going to happen. So we've identified the thing that we're going to work on, and I think the thing that I'm going to focus on in this video, because I made another video on this week, is on the backhand, just using the hips more. So we're saying that the split step's good, the unit turn's good, the movement to the ball is good, my spacing is good, but the thing I really need to work on now is using my hips to initiate the swing. That's what I've got to focus on. And I've got to focus only on that, or maybe 1 or 2 other things. I've said this in some of my other videos, that when I'm trying to work on my own technique, I always think about keeping my head still on contact, because it's the most important thing for getting control, because it allows us to make adjustments and basically increases the chances that we're going to hit it in. So I always think about that, and then 1 other thing. So in this example, I'm thinking about using my hips to drive the movement. The way this works, you want to build up a number of repetitions without the ball first. Look, I know it's way more fun being on court. We play tennis because we like playing tennis. But if you want to make changes, you want to work on shadow swings. You want to groove this stuff without the ball. Because if you can't do stuff without the ball there, you'll never be able to do it with the ball, not optimally. It's just not the way it works. So you practice at home. So if I've identified that I'm going to be working on my hip, I'm a single-hander, so I just practice doing repetitions of using my hip, practice it in different stances, just driving from my hip, practice it with different footwork steps, driving from my hips, and just work on that one thing, thinking about it over and over again. So I've accumulated a certain number of repetitions, my body's starting to own this, and then you go out with a partner, or maybe a ball machine, or however you're going to practice it. But say I'm practicing it with a partner, we're drilling backhand to backhand rallies, and all I am thinking about during this rally is, okay, hip, okay, drive from your hip, okay, drive from your hip. And I'm just reminding myself, I've got this ongoing conversation in my head. And you've got to evaluate your performance based on that one thing. So if I'm meant to be working on my hip, and I do a wonderful drive with my hip. Technically, all that stuff is perfect, and the ball lands 3 inches out. What I can't do is get mad at myself. Oh, why did you miss the shot? Doesn't matter that you miss a shot. Obviously, we want the shot to go in, but what we're focusing on improving is the hip. And when we get this working more efficiently, more shots are going to land in the way that we want. So you have to kind of approach your technical changes with this mindset of just focus on the thing that you need to focus on for a period of time until it becomes automatic. And that can take a little bit of time, maybe 1 month, maybe 2 months, maybe a few months for each technical change you're going to make. So that might sound scary, but the truth is that most adult tennis players get to a point and they don't improve because they don't have this sort of practice strategy, and they try and work on too many different things, and they're tweaking this and they're changing this, and they just get stuck where they are. You have to focus on one thing at a time, work on it, give yourself positive instructions, go through the process, and you will start to improve your backhand technique. But there is something we need to talk about before we close out the video, and that is that there are limitations to this stuff. There's basically 2 parts to everything in tennis. There's, do you know what you're supposed to do? There's a gazillion videos on this, on the different technique of all these different things, and I've just broken this down for you. But the second part is your body actually capable of doing this stuff? And unfortunately, this is what holds a lot of players back, including me. I would love to be a professional tennis player, but I'm not good enough. That's why I'm not playing professional tennis. But one of the things that stops me doing that is my physical limitations. I used to have a lot of problems with my visual system. I'm definitely not flexible enough. I'm probably not coordinated enough. These are the things that hold me back. So I spend a lot of time working on my body to upgrade it so that I can play at a higher level. So if you want to think about the technique, there are some things that are just going to hold you back. The visual system is always number one. You have to react to the ball. So before I can do my unit turn and move into position, I have to see where the ball's going. If you can't see clearly at distance, if your visual processing speeds aren't sufficient, you're not going to be able to do that on time. You're going to be slower to the ball, and you won't be able to get set up in an optimal position. This is just the way it works. And this is why if I was to step out on court with Roger Federer or Nadal or Djokovic and they were slapping forehands at me, I would not be in position in the right time because I just can't respond at that level. I can respond reasonably well and I play at a reasonable level, but obviously not at that level. So you have to work on that stuff. Spacing is huge for all your shots. If you get jammed, like we talked about earlier in the video, it throws off the mechanics and you can't swing out to the ball. You can't hit efficiently. And that's based on your ability to judge distance and depth, as is your timing. If the ball's coming towards you and you start your swing at the right time, you can meet it out in front. If you start your swing a fraction of a second too late, now you're hitting it late, and you have to compensate for these things. And this is why you see people they're hitting a backhand, they're getting jammed, they're hitting it late, they're doing all this stuff because they start their swing at the wrong time. And then in terms of consistency, we've got the ball tracking. If you can't track the ball efficiently, it's really hard to watch it on your strings through contact. So potentially your visual system is holding you back. I've done lots of vision assessments with hundreds of people and lots of tennis players. You can always find visual discrepancies that are holding players back. So even if you think you've got perfect vision, I'm fairly certain you won't have, because I've never assessed anyone with perfect vision. If you do, you are the exception to the rule, but most people do, and it holds them back. The cool thing is you can train your vision, you can make it better, and you can address a lot of this stuff. That's what I had to do with my own game. To help you with that, I've created a free tennis vision starter program, simple program. It'll take 5 or 6 minutes. There's a link down below that's going to take you to a page where you can get hold of it. I'll also place a link up there that's going to allow you to get hold of it. I highly advise that you work on it in addition to working on your game. For the sake of 5 minutes a day, it can make a massive difference. But we also need to talk about the coordination component, because tennis involves a lot of coordination. We've got to get to the ball, but then the techniques themselves require a lot of control from different body parts. So what I want you to understand when it comes to tennis techniques, they are complicated movements, and complicated movements are made from smaller movements, but the complicated movements can only ever be as good as the smaller movements. So if you don't have good control over your shoulders, over your wrists, over your hips, over your pelvis, over your spine, you don't suddenly develop control over them when you're sprinting across the court and you're trying to hit a technique and a point in a match. That's not the way it works. You have to get your body working more efficiently. You have to get your coordination up to par. Then you'll start to be able to make these technical adjustments, because all that stuff that we've talked about, there's a movement component to it. But again, that's where the good news comes in. you can actually train this stuff and make it better. Now, I don't have a free program for you on this one. This is one of the big things that I work with through my paid programs, because I do have a program. This is one of the key areas that I help tennis players in. I try and teach you everything that I know on the court about all this stuff, but what I really focus on helping you with is how to get your body working, because if you want to play higher level tennis, you have to see and move and think like a higher level tennis player. It's just the way it works. So I've created a free masterclass that's going to give you a little bit more detail about it. So if you really want to improve your game and you're interested in this sort of stuff, I highly advise you check that out. You'll probably find it very interesting. Okay, that's all I've got for you today. Number one, we have got to identify what we need to work on, sequence of events. Number two is we've got to focus on it and achieve a certain number of repetitions to make it automatic. And then number three, you've got to get your body working well enough to play at the level you want. It's just the way it works. Okay, I hope you found this video helpful. If you've got any questions, comments, I'd love to hear. Is there something you're struggling with on your backhand? Let me know in the comment section.